Acha. Good afternoon, everybody. Let us begin with today's class. In the last class, I think we were discussing with the renewable energy sources, and we had discussed about solar, wind, geothermal, hydropower. We also talked about OTC. We talked about tidal power, etc., etc. So let us begin our today's discussion. Let us continue with that discussion, and first we shall be discussing about biomass energy, and then we will gradually move into the non-renewable energy sources. তাহলে ফার্স্ট লেট আস বিগিন আওয়ার ডিসকাশন উইথ বায়োমাস এনার্জি, বা যাকে আমরা বাংলায় বলে থাকি জীবভরের শক্তি। বায়োমাস মানে জীবভর। তাহলে জীবভর থেকে যে শক্তি হয় সেই শক্তি নিয়ে আমরা আগে একটু আলোচনা করি। Now as far as biomass is concerned, we can very simply define biomass as a sort of organic matter which is produced by either plants or it may be produced by animals. So biomass in very simplest terms is a sort of an organic matter which is produced either by animals or by plants. And some simple examples of biomass will include, like say crop residues, cattle dung, some agricultural wastes. So these are all the different types of biomasses which are available to us and which can definitely be put to use for the purpose of producing energy. Now, what are the various ways by which we can utilize biomass to produce energy? We will be discussing those aspects first. So the first way by which we can utilize biomass is by thinking in terms of energy plantations. Now the question will automatically arise ki what exactly are energy plantations? Now we already know that the green plants, they trap solar energy by a procedure called photosynthesis, and that solar energy which they trap via photosynthesis, they convert it into biomass. So obviously if you are able to burn this biomass, or instead of direct burning, if we can produce energy by converting the biomass into a say comparatively clean burnable gas, or maybe we can convert biomass into fuels by applying some fermentation techniques, then definitely we can utilize this energy. So energy plantation is a concept whereby we utilize the photosynthetic ability of the green plants to trap solar energy, thereby converting it into biomass. Say there are some woody trees like poplar, then you can think of some non-woody herbaceous alternatives like the weeds, the sugarcane, the water hyacinth, or even to some extent the cereal crops. So they are all energy rich organic substances. Now how can we utilize them? Either we can burn them directly, or maybe we can convert it into a burnable gas, or maybe by applying the process of fermentation we can convert it into a fuel. So this concept of growing crops or growing plants for the purpose of using it as an energy source is what we call as an energy plantation, So this is one of the ways by which we can utilize energy from biomass. The next thing which is also gaining popularity is petrol crops. You must have heard of petrol crops. Now there are certain latex or containing plants like those belonging to the Euphorbiaceae family. These are the latex bearing plants, and such latex bearing plants belonging to the Euphorbiaceae family or the euphorbias, they are quite often found to be rich in hydrocarbons, and under certain conditions of high temperature and pressure, these latex containing plants, they are found to be yielding oils. So these oily material, it may be either burnt directly in a diesel engine, or it can be refined to produce gasoline. And these crops are popularly called as petrocrops. For example, the plants which yield rubber, the latex bearing plants. Now another good example of a petrocrop is the jatropha plant. Now the jatropha, from which we produce biodiesel, the seeds of the jatropha plant, they can be subjected to pressure, and under pressure they can be used or utilized to produce diesel. And since we are producing this diesel from a living plant, we call it as biological diesel or biodiesel, which is gaining popularity in the Indian railway sector, so such are called as your petrocrops. Now we can also utilize biomass in the form of direct burning from agricultural and urban biomass waste. Now the agricultural sector produces a lot of biomass waste. For example, the crop residues, the sugarcane residues, which are often called bagasse, or if you think the shells of coconut. So these are very common, what you can say, examples of biomass which can be burnt to produce energy. Even if you think of animal dung, gobar in our country is a very popular rural fuel where they make cow dung cakes, and these cow dung cakes are burned to produce heat. That heat is utilized for mainly rural cooking purposes, rural lighting purposes, etc., etc. So these three are very simple examples which we have quoted, whereby we can utilize biomass either in the form of energy plantations, or maybe in the form of petrocrops, or maybe we can directly burn the residual biomass from the agricultural sector, or maybe from the biomass generated from the urban sector. But whenever we burn plant or animal residues, there are certain problems associated with direct burning of plant and animal residues. For example, it causes air pollution, and it produces a lot of ash as a residue. So direct burning is often not preferred. So what we do, we think of alternatives like biogas. So biogas is a good alternative to direct burning of plant and animal wastes or plant and animal residues. So what exactly is biogas? Biogas largely contains methane. So apart from methane, it may contain some amounts of hydrogen sulfide, some amounts of carbon dioxide, some amount of hydrogen, but mostly biogas contains methane. And how is it produced? It is produced by the anaerobic degradation or the anaerobic decomposition of plant waste or maybe animal waste. So what is the meaning of the term anaerobic decomposition? Whenever we talk of anaerobic decomposition, it simply means decomposition in the absence of oxygen. So whenever we talk of anaerobic decomposition, it simply means decomposition in the absence of oxygen. And whenever these anaerobic microbes, like say methanobacteria, methanosarcina, methanococcus, these are all quite common examples of anaerobic microbes. They break down your the wastes in the absence of oxygen. They produce largely methane. And biogas, as you know, has a tremendous potential in our country. Now in our country, the term gobar gas is more popular. The term gobar gas is more popular, and biogas has a tremendous potential in our country. This is because India has the largest cattle population in the world. India has the largest cattle population in the world. So since we have the largest cattle population, the cattle will be producing huge amounts of dung. So that cattle dung If it can be broken down anaerobically, we can definitely produce several tons and tons or millimeter cubes or meter cubes of biogas. So this power, that is power from biogas, is definitely a power of the future as far as India is concerned, because we are not in the shortage of cattle. We are the largest cattle we have the largest cattle population in the world. In this context, we can definitely discuss some main advantages of biogas. So first and foremost, if you think, biogas uh, is a clean burning gas because it largely contains methane. Because it's clean burning, it will obviously be non-polluting, and it will be a cheap gas in the future because of our large cattle population. Now, if we are thinking in terms of biogas, that means biogas will be produced by anaerobically degrading the cattle dung. So once we are using the cattle dung as a raw material for biogas production, this will provide a very effective means of cattle dung management, whereby we will be converting that dung waste into wealth. So that is a very important aspect of biogas production, whereby we are converting the waste, which is cattle dung, into wealth, which is biogas. So this provides a very effective means of cattle dung management technique. And then after that dung is anaerobically broken down, it is converted to sludge. Now that sludge, that leftover sludge, is also fertilizer rich. That leftover sludge is also fertilizer rich. It is also nutrient rich, and as a result, that leftover sludge in the biogas plant, it can be used in the agricultural sector as an alternative to the synthetic fertilizers, as a source of manure. So definitely these are some of the advantages of biogas. So what are the advantages? It is a clean burning fuel. It is a non-polluting fuel as it largely burns methane. It is cheap because its production will be cheaper as we have the largest cattle population. And then the sludge which is left over after the anaerobic digestion of that cattle dung, that sludge is also rich in nutrients. That sludge can be used as a source of fertilizer, as an alternative to the traditional synthetic fertilizers which we have been using. So these are some of the uses of or advantages of biogas. So in our country, there are two main types of biogas plants. These are the fixed dome type of biogas plant and the floating gas holder type of biogas plant. So what are the two common types of biogas plant in our country? One is the fixed dome type of biogas plant, and the other is the floating gas holder type biogas plant. I will not move into the details. There is no need to study the details of it. Just remember the names, that is floating gas holder type and the fixed dome type. Acha. So far we talked about biomass energy, we talked about energy plantations, we talked about petrol crops, we talked about agricultural and urban waste biomass which can be burnt, but we saw that direct burning of biomass causes air pollution, it produces a lot of ash, smoke, etc. So it will be better to convert these organic waste into biogas. And then we discussed the advantages of biogas. We discussed the names, only the names of the two basic types of biogas plants, that is the fixed dome type and the floating gas holder type. Now after talking about biogas, the next thing about which we shall talk in the context of biomass energy, that is biofuels. So please write down the name biofuels. Biofuels, BIOFUELS, biofuels. Now apart from converting biomass into biogas, there is another available alternative to us whereby we can ferment the biomass to produce alcohols like ethanol and methanol. So we can ferment the available biomass to alcohols like ethanol and methanol. And these alcohols like ethanol and methanol, they can also be used as a source of fuel. They can also be used as a source of fuel. And apart from that, you can also produce ethanol from carbohydrate rich substances like corns and sugar canes. And why is the world so interested in producing ethanol? Because again, ethanol is a clean burning and non-polluting fuel. Ethanol is a clean burning and non-polluting fuel. That is why we are focusing our technology on anaerobically fermenting biomass to produce alcohols, particularly ethanol and sometimes methanol also. However, if I compare ethanol to petrol, which is a very popular fuel in the modern world, which forms the backbone of the modern economy, petrol, compared to petrol, ethanol's calorific value is less. Ethanol's calorific value is less. Lesser calorific value means you have to burn greater amount of fuel to produce the desired amount of heat energy. So this is one of the associated disadvantages of ethanol, but still it is gaining popularity because we can produce ethanol from our waste. We can produce ethanol from the biomass produced by the urban sectors, biomass produced by our cattle, biomass produced by our agricultural sector. But on the low side of it, ethanol has a lower calorific value. So in the modern days, what we do, the petrol which we talk of, the petrol which we commonly use in our vehicles, it is also known as gasoline. It is also known as gasoline. So a popular alternative is gasohol, GASOHOL. A popular alternative is gasohol, GASOHOL. And gasohol is a mixture of gasoline and ethanol. So please remember that gasohol is a mixture of gasoline and ethanol, and it is also a popular fuel, particularly in countries like Zimbabwe. In a large country like Brazil, gasohol is quite a popular fuel where they produce gasoline and mix it with ethanol, thereby producing gasohol. So these are some of the ways, some of the means by which we can utilize our biomass energy. So write down a question or write down a few set of questions now. Number one, what is biomass? What is biomass? Number two, what is biomass? It can be a 1 mark or a 2 mark question. Number two, what are the various ways? What are the various ways by which biomass energy can be utilized? What are the various ways by which biomass energy can be utilized? Number three, write short notes on energy plantations, comma, petrol crops, comma, biogas, comma, biofuels, biogas, comma, biofuels. So all these short notes will be of 5 marks each. the various means by which we can utilize biomass energy, that can be a long question of 10 marks each, and the definition of biomass, that will be a short question of maybe 1 or 2 marks. Okay, so please prepare these answers well. Acha. Now, after talking about your renewable energy sources, we talked about several renewable energy sources. Now we shall talk of the non-renewable energy sources. Now we shall talk about non-renewable energy sources. Now, as far as these non-renewable energy sources are concerned, you already know that these are stock resources. Their amount is finite. It takes a long time for these resources to be formed in nature, but the way we are utilizing these resources, the rate of the resource utilization is much higher than the rate of this resource production, because to form these non-renewable energy sources, it will take millions of years, and we can simply exhaust them within a few hundred years. So non-renewable energy resources are finite and they are stock resources. So let us begin our discussion with a few non-renewable energy resources. So first, note down what are the non-renewable energy resources that you will study for your exam. Write down non-renewable energy resources to be studied. Non-renewable energy resources to be studied. Write down number 1, coal. Number 2, petroleum. Number 3, natural gas. Number 4, nuclear energy. Okay, so these are the 4 basic types of non-renewable energy resources that you will be studying: coal, petroleum, natural gas and nuclear energy. Okay, so first let us begin our discussion with coal. Now, as far as coal is concerned, we all know that coal is a complex organic material. It's a very complex organic material, and it contains carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, etc., etc. And coal was formed on our planet. Coal was formed on our planet, say about 250 to 350 million years ago. So coal was formed on our planet about 250 to 350 million years ago, during the Carboniferous age. So I am repeating once again, coal is a complex organic material. We all know that. It contains carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, and it was formed around 250 to 350 million years ago. 250 থেকে 350, 250 to 350 million years ago, during the Carboniferous age. During the Carboniferous age. So you can study about the Carboniferous age in the internet. It is a part of the geological time scale. So coal was formed during the Carboniferous age, and mainly in the hot and damp regions of the earth. It was formed during the Carboniferous age, mainly in the hot and damp regions of the earth. So what happened exactly? These prehistoric plants and animals alongside the rivers, in the low-lying areas, in the swamps, they died. Obviously, these prehistoric plants and animals, they also had a lifespan. Once their lifespan was over, they died. The dead bodies, it began to be buried in the soil, and as one set of plants and animals died, another set of plants and animals came on top of them. They also died. Then it was superseded by soil, rocks, again another set of plants and animals. So as a result, what exactly happened? A huge amount of heat and pressure got its role, and this huge amount of heat and pressure, once they got their role, they gradually began to modify these dead bodies of the plants and animals into what we call as coal. So the process of coal formation, or which is also called as coalification, the process of coal formation, or which is also called as coalification, is a very long term process. It takes place due to the heat and pressure, because of the super incumbent load acting on top of the dead bodies of these ancient plants and animals, and over time it got converted to coal. And obviously coal is a carbon rich compound, and depending on the carbon content there are various grades of coal available in the market, like say the pit coal, which is the lowest variety of coal. Then you have the lignite coal, which is also called as the brown coal. Then you have the bituminous coal, which is also called as the soft coal. And then you have the anthracite coal, which is also known as the hard coal. So these are the different varieties of coal, and their varieties have been determined by the amount of carbon content present in them. And in terms of carbon content, we can say that anthracite is the best variety of coal, and followed by bituminous, then you have lignite, and pit is the lowest grade of coal because it contains the least amount of carbon content. So coal at present, if you think, it is the most abundant fossil fuel in the world. It is the most abundant fossil fuel in the world. Now you must have heard of the term called fossil fuel. Like coal, petroleum, natural gas, they are all called fossil fuels. Why? Because they have been formed from the fossilized remains of the past plants and animals. So why are coal, petroleum and natural gas called fossil fuels? বা যাকে আমরা বাংলায় বলি জীবাশ্ম জ্বালানি. So these are called fossil fuels because they have been formed from the fossilized remains of the prehistoric plants, animals, and because they have been formed from the fossilized remains of the prehistoric life forms, that is why they are called as fossil fuel. So coal, as I said just now, is the most abundant fossil fuel in the world. So now the question is, the question that will arise, that is how long will coal last? That is how long will coal last? So coal will last at its present rate for another say 200 years. Coal will last at its present rate for another 200 years. But if we increase its usage, if we increase its usage say by 2% per year, then the estimates say that coal reserves will be exhausted within the next 65 years. So at the present rate it will last for another 200 years. If we increase its usage by say another 2%, then the coal reserves may get exhausted within the next 65 years. And in India, coal reserves are commonly found say in West Bengal, parts of Odisha, West Bengal, Raniganj, where we live. Then you have Jharkhand, Jharia, Odisha, etc. But there is a problem with burning coal. So although coal is a major fossil fuel, but there is a problem with burning coal, and the problem is it produces tremendous amounts of pollution. And you burn coal, that means it's a carbon source. So C plus O2 will give you CO2. So CO2 is the leading greenhouse gas. So whenever we burn coal, we will produce carbon dioxide, thereby contributing towards the problem of global warming. Apart from that, coal also contains say components like sulfur, components like nitrogen. So whenever you burn it, obviously it is expected to produce the oxides of sulfur, SOx, or the oxides of nitrogen, NOx. And these oxides of sulfur, that is SOx and NOx, they are contributors towards acid rain. They are contributors towards acid rain. So not only coal burning produces CO2, which is responsible for global warming, it also produces gases like SOx and NOx, which are contributors towards acid rain. And then think of the process of coal extraction, that is mining, which is an environmentally degradable process whose disadvantages we have discussed in a previous class. So I will not move into that, but these are some of the problems associated with coal. So a better fossil fuel compared to coal is petroleum. It is cleaner than coal. Compared to coal, it is a clean burning fuel, and very importantly, it is the lifeline of the present global economy. So petroleum is the lifeline of the present global economy, and you will be surprised to know that there are about 13 countries in the world, 13, which have about 67% of the global petroleum reserves, and they form the OPEC. I am typing the name OPEC. OPEC. So OPEC, its full form is Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. So the full form of OPEC is Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And very interestingly, if you think of Saudi Arabia, it is the country which has around 1/4 of the global oil reserves. So Saudi, it has 1/4 of the global oil reserves. So 13 countries, they account for 67% of the petroleum reserves. Together they form the OPEC, that is Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And only if you think of Saudi Arabia, it has around 25% or 1/4 of the global oil reserves. And if you think of the present day's usage situation, you will be surprised to know that the way at which we are using petrol in our vehicles, in our aeroplanes, in the industries, etc., petroleum reserves are expected to be exhausted within the next 40 years. So that is definitely a cause of concern, because we have not developed an economy alternative to petroleum, because petroleum is the lifeline of global economy, as I said. So no petrol means a situation of a very hampered, or a slow growth or a low growth global economy. So that is the situation we can face within the next 40 or 50 years. So petroleum, it mainly occurs under the sea. And maybe at depths of around 800 to 5000 meters. And the predominant source of petroleum is primarily the marine organisms. So coal was formed on land, petroleum was formed under the sea. And the petroleum that we extract from under the sea is mainly called crude oil. And this crude oil is practically a mixture of several liquid hydrocarbons. So this crude oil, once it is extracted, then it is subjected to a process called fractional distillation, and at different temperatures we get different products from crude oil. And some of the very popular products, like say kerosene, petrol or gasoline, which we use in our automobiles, diesel, lubricating oil, paraffin wax, etc., even asphalt, which we use in our roads. So these are some of the products which we obtain via the process of fractional distillation of crude oil. And always remember that petroleum is more preferred to coal because it is a clean burning fuel. Coal leaves a lot of ash, but petroleum does not leave any residues. Compared to coal, petroleum is easy to store and transport, but coal storage, it is not easy. So that is why we say that compared to coal, petroleum is definitely a better fuel. But again, the process of petroleum extraction, it is not eco-friendly. It disturbs the oceanic ecosystems, it disturbs the balance of the oceanic ecosystems. Then if there are leakages, it causes pollution. The process of petroleum extraction can cause oil pollution in the oceans. And again, whenever you burn petrol, in one way or the other, you are invariably producing carbon dioxide, which is again a greenhouse gas. So we see that either you burn coal or either you burn petroleum, you are producing pollution, you are producing CO2, you are contributing to greenhouse effect, or you are contributing to global warming. So we can talk of the next fossil fuel which is very popular, that is natural gas. That is natural gas. You must have heard of this word, natural gas. It is gaining popularity in the present world. So natural gas, if we think of say natural gas is mainly composed of methane. So around 95% of natural gas is methane. 95% of it is methane. And very interestingly, along with methane, natural gas also contains propane and ethane. So mainly methane, around 95%. Along with methane, you also get say traces or bits and pieces of propane and ethane. Now these natural gas deposits, generally they occur along with petroleum. Generally they occur along with petroleum, and when it occurs along with petroleum, it is popularly called as associated gas. It occurs as a gas cap over the oil pool. So that oil pool is found beneath the ocean, and whenever you are drilling for petroleum, the first thing that comes out is the gas. So that gas is extracted and collected separately, and then the oil comes out. And because this natural gas occurs in association with oil or petroleum, we say it is associated gas. We call it as an associated gas. But sometimes natural gas may occur on its own due to some anaerobic processes taking place under the ground, and such a dry natural gas which occurs on its own without any association with petroleum, it is called non-associated gas. It is called non-associated natural gas. And if we think of natural gas, it is the cleanest fossil fuel. Now, why are we saying that natural gas is the cleanest fossil fuel? This is because along with coal and petroleum, traces of sulfur, nitrogen, etc. may be present. So whenever we burn them, we are producing oxides of sulfur and oxides of nitrogen. But natural gas, which mainly contains methane, if we burn it, we generally get carbon dioxide. We do not get oxides of sulfur and oxides of nitrogen. So among coal, petroleum and natural gas is the cleanest burning fuel. And if you think of the global reserves of natural gas, Russia has the maximum reserves of natural gas. So they account for say around 40% of the global reserves. So 40% of the global reserve of natural gas occurs in Russia. Even in USA and Iran, there is a lot of natural gas. Even in India, there are some oil fields which are associated with gases. For example, say the Krishna Godavari Delta or the offshore area of Mumbai, parts of Tripura, parts of Rajasthan. There we do find some associated natural gas. And as I said, that natural gas is gaining popularity as a domestic and industrial fuel. It is gaining popularity in the form of CNG. You must have heard of CNG, compressed natural gas, which is gaining popularity as a transport fuel. You must be knowing that the bus fleet in Delhi is completely running on CNG because it is a cleaner fuel, and it has been successful to bring down the pollution levels in Delhi to some extent by burning natural gas and using it as an automobile fuel. So this was about the three very popular fossil fuels, that is coal, petroleum and natural gas. Now the next non-renewable source of energy about which we can definitely discuss is the nuclear energy. Now, as far as nuclear energy is concerned, you must have studied in physics during your higher secondary about radioactivity, radioisotopes, etc. etc. You have studied about half-lives and disintegration constants, etc. So, in our class, we will be discussing two very simple principles by which we can produce nuclear energy. So, see, energy production practically requires something, some means by which you can rotate the turbine, and the commonest mean is to produce steam. For that you need heat energy. So under the scheme of nuclear power generation, what exactly is done? The most popular scheme is the scheme of nuclear fission, whereby a heavy nuclei, say if you think of maybe uranium 235 by 92, which is a heavy nuclei, if it is bombarded by some, say, neutrons, if it is bombarded by neutrons, that bombarding neutron particle will split up that heavy uranium nucleus into lighter nuclei of, say, maybe krypton or maybe barium, etc. And once we split up that heavier nuclei of uranium 235 by 92 into lighter nuclei of krypton and barium, it is associated with the release of tremendous amount of energy, and that energy can be harnessed to produce steam, and that steam, it can be harnessed to rotate the turbines, thereby producing power. So this is a very simple principle by which we are producing nuclear power. And there is yet another technology, nuclear fusion. Now nuclear fusion technology is still under a lot of research, and this is the technology by which energy is produced in the sun. You must be knowing, whereby two deuterium nuclei, or maybe deuterium and tritium nuclei, they may be fused together to give us a helium nuclei, and this process of fusing to lighter nuclei produces tremendous amount of heat energy. But the problem with this technology is that we still are in the process of developing materials which will not melt under such a high temperature. So compared to nuclear fusion, nuclear fission is a technology that is commonly being used throughout the world, and also it is gaining popularity. But nuclear power, although it is a huge source of power, it's a massive source of power, but it comes with a lot of problems. Nuclear power comes with a lot of problems. So let us try to analyze the problems associated with nuclear power and nuclear energy. Now this nuclear power, although it has tremendous potential, but there is always the risk of accidents. As you must have heard of the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, which took place in Chernobyl in former USSR. You must have heard of the 3 Mile Island disaster, which took place in USA, most probably during 1979. Then you must have heard of the Fukushima Daiichi disaster, which took place in Japan in 2011. So production of nuclear power plants, they are always accident prone, and if such an accident takes place in India, it will be disastrous for the Indian population. Huge number of people will lose their lives, because India is a densely populated country, and then these nuclear elements which will be produced, the radioactive substances, they have long half lives, and as a result they will be continuously releasing radioactive substances into air, water, soil, thereby causing variety of diseases and disorders for the upcoming several years. So in our country, although we have some nuclear power plants like say in Narora in Uttar Pradesh, or maybe say in the Rana Pratap Sagar near Kota in Rajasthan, or maybe Tarapur in Maharashtra, or maybe say in Kalpakkam located in the state of Tamil Nadu. But still, although we have nuclear power plants in our country, but running these power plants is always risky because of the risk of accident. So accident is a criteria which has to be dealt with, number one. The second criteria is where to dispose the nuclear waste. Now the spent uranium fuel, so in your nuclear reactor you have to feed the reactor with uranium. So once that uranium fuel is used up, although it is used up in terms of power production, but that particular fuel is still radioactive. So the obvious question that will arise, ki where to dump this nuclear fuel? Because this nuclear fuel is radioactive, you cannot bury it under the soil, you cannot dump it under the ocean. So disposal of the nuclear waste is still a massive question which the technology of the future has to answer. So these are some of the problems associated with nuclear energy. Okay, so just write down a few questions. Write down a few questions. Write down. Write short notes on coal, petroleum, natural gas, nuclear energy. Coal, petroleum, natural gas, nuclear energy. Okay, short notes mane they will be containing 5 marks each. Then write down, discuss the disadvantages of using fossil fuels. Discuss the disadvantages of using fossil fuels. Then discuss the disadvantages and advantages of nuclear energy. Discuss the disadvantages and advantages of nuclear energy. Okay? Okay. Now write down one more question. Suggest some strategies to conserve energy. At the individual and community level. Suggest some strategies to conserve energy at the individual and community level. So this question is also very common in the exam, that where you are required to suggest some strategies to conserve energy. So this question, I think you can write it on your own, that to switch off unnecessary lights and fans, then taking carpools, walking or cycling short distances, carrying out afforestation activities, particularly in and around houses with deciduous trees, and then switching over to alternative energies like solar, etc. So this you can write the answer on your own, I suppose. Achha, so, but this is again an important question. Suggest some strategies to conserve energy at the individual and community level. Achha. Now one more thing I would like to tell you, this lecture for today's class I will upload it in my YouTube channel, and I am giving you the name of my YouTube channel, so you can subscribe to that channel and listen to that lecture again, and kindly tell it to your friends, those who could not attend the class or those who could not join the class, so they can again listen to this entire lecture over the YouTube channel. So I am giving you the name of the YouTube channel, Basics of Environment by সায়ন্তন দত্ত। ঠিক আছে, যারা ধরো ক্লাসটা অ্যাটেন্ড করতে পারলে না বা জয়েন করতে পারছো না, তোমার ওই গুগল মিটে তো 100-এর বেশি অ্যাকোমোডেট করা যাচ্ছে না, তো তারা এই চ্যানেলটাতে আমি ভিডিওটা আপলোড করে দেবো, সেখান থেকে তোমরা শুনতে পারবে। ফুল ক্লাসের লেকচারটা আমি আপলোড করে দেবো, ঠিক আছে, অ্যালং উইথ দ্য টপিক অ্যান্ড ডেট। তো আই থিঙ্ক উইথ দ্যাট উই ক্যান কনক্লুড টুডেস ক্লাস। যদি কারোর কিছু ডাউটস থাকে বা কোয়ারিজ থাকে, জিজ্ঞেস করে নাও। ইফ ইউ হ্যাভ এনি ডাউটস অর কোয়ারিজ, প্লিজ আস্ক, otherwise we will be concluding the class. Anyone with any doubts or queries? Okay, so because you are not having much of a doubt, I am concluding the class and I will be uploading the video shortly, and so please subscribe to this channel and tell your friends, share the name of the channel. হ্যাঁ, কি ডাউট আছে বলো। শ্রেয়স ভট্টাচার্য, বলো কি ডাউট আছে। যদি কোনো ডাউট থাকে বলো। আচ্ছা, ঠিক আছে, দেন উই আর কনক্লুডিং দ্য ক্লাস। তাহলে আমরা ক্লাসটাকে কনক্লুড করছি, ঠিক আছে। আচ্ছা, ইউটিউব চ্যানেলের নামটা দেখো আমি লিখে দিয়েছি, চ্যানেলটার নাম আমি লিখে দিয়েছি, ওই যে বেসিক্স অফ এনভায়রনমেন্ট বাই সায়ন্তন দত্ত। দেখো চ্যাট বক্সে দেখো, বেসিক্স অফ এনভায়রনমেন্ট বাই সায়ন্তন দত্ত। আওয়াজ আসছে না, ওটা দেখো নেটের প্রবলেমের জন্য হয় মাঝে মধ্যে, ওগুলো তো হবেই বাবা, কিছু তো করার নেই, অনলাইন ক্লাস, এটা হতেই পারে। ঠিক আছে, তাহলে আমরা ক্লাসটা কনক্লুড করছি। ওকে দেন, বাই। না, লাস্ট দিনের ক্লাসটা ভালোভাবে তো তখন আমরা রেকর্ডিং করিনি, ওই জন্যেই লাস্ট দিনের ক্লাসটা ইউটিউবে নেই। তবে লাস্ট দিনের ক্লাসের কিছু কিছু টপিকস আজকে আমি আরেকবার রিপিট করে দিলাম, ঠিক আছে। লাস্ট দিনের ক্লাসের কিছু টপিকস আমি আরেকবার আজকে রিপিট করে দিলাম, কারণ আগের দিনের ক্লাসটা খুব ডিস্টার্বড গেছে। তো আজকের ক্লাসটা খুব ভালোভাবেই হয়েছে। ইউ আর এক্সিলেন্ট টুডে অল অফ ইউ। তো এবার থেকে আমরা যেমন যেমন ক্লাস করব, দিনের দিন ক্লাসের লেকচারটা আমি ইউটিউবে আপলোড করে দেবো, তোমরা আরেকবার করে শুনে নেবে, যতবার শুনতে ইচ্ছা করবে শুনতে পারবে, ঠিক আছে। আচ্ছা, কি ডাউটস আছে বলো, ডাউটসগুলো টাইপ করো, কার কি ডাউটস আছে টাইপ করো। ওই যে ল্যাটেক্স বিয়ারিং প্লান্ট আমি বললাম, মানে প্র্যাকটিক্যালি রাবার প্লান্ট, যেগুলোকে আমরা বলি ইউফোরবিয়াস। ইউফোরবিয়াস, এক সেকেন্ড আমি স্পেলিংটা বলে দিচ্ছি। ল্যাটেক্স বিয়ারিং যে প্লান্টসগুলো থাকে, যেমন ইউফোরবিয়াস আর কি, EUPHORBIAS, ইউফোরবিয়াস, ঠিক আছে। এনিথিং এলস? আর যদি কোনো ডাউটস থাকে বলো। ওকে, হ্যাঁ, 4টে কোয়েশ্চেন, 4টে দিলাম, আমার তো এক্স্যাক্টলি মনে নেই কটা দিলাম কোয়েশ্চেন্স। যদি কেউ নোট করে থাকো তোমাদের হোয়াটসঅ্যাপ গ্রুপে শেয়ার করে নেবে, নিজেদের হোয়াটসঅ্যাপ গ্রুপগুলোতে। আর সবচেয়ে অ্যাডভান্টেজ হচ্ছে তোমার ইউটিউব চ্যানেলে তুমি আরেকবার শুনতে পারবে লেকচারটা তুমি এগিয়ে গিয়ে শুনে নিতে পারবে, তাহলে তোমার ডাউটসগুলো ক্লিয়ার হয়ে যাবে। তুমি চ্যানেলটার নাম দিয়ে সার্চ করবে না, তাহলেই পেয়ে যাবে। বেসিক্স অফ এনভায়রনমেন্ট বাই সায়ন্তন দত্ত, পুরোটা নাম দিয়ে সার্চ করবে, চলে আসবে। ঠিক আছে, ওকে দেন। ঠিক আছে, তাহলে ক্লাসটা এন্ড করছি। ওকে, বাই, চলো।